Hello everyone, I am getting back into the swing of things here on my channel after a 15-day expedition across Belize and into northern Guatemala. So if you haven't seen my travel vlog for that yet, I will link it down below in the description box. You don't need to watch that for this video, but I wanted to sit down with you and really talk about a lot of the culture shocks that I experienced while traveling in Central America in comparison to North America, mainly the United States. But I have traveled all over the US, into Canada, I've traveled to Europe many times. I did not experience as many culture shocks as I did going into Europe and traveling across different countries there than I did going into Central America. Going into Central America was a huge shock to me for so many different reasons, and I actually wrote down all the things I wanted to talk about in this video because I want to talk about it from many different perspectives, from food, just local culture in general, healthcare, the police force, the roads, grocery stores, religion, and just some basic travel tips in general, because one of the things I truly love that I don't talk about really a lot on this channel is traveling. I am such a traveler. So I had some people comment on that travel vlog asking me to share some travel tips, and I had mentioned at the end of that video that if you wanted me to do a video about culture shocks, to let me know in the comments, and you all did. There were so many people that were asking me to do this video about culture shocks, which I'm so excited about because I love that. Anyways, while I talk, I have a couple different things here. So we're gonna be making a flower essence today, and then also I have some loose powder incense that I want to turn into cones. If you are interested in making loose incense for yourself, I do have a video on that. I will link that in the description box as well. It goes over how to make loose incense and how to really create a robust and well-balanced blend. So definitely check out that incense video that I have. It'll go more into detail to how to make your loose powders. But sometimes I get really tired of burning the loose powders on a charcoal disc, and sometimes I just want incense cones. So we are going to take all the powders I have. I'll share the different blends I have too, because I got a lot going on here. And then you mix it with Makko powder, and then you kind of create it into a cone. So we're gonna be doing those two things today. So let's talk flower essences. Flower essences are really easy to make, and it depends on how hardcore you wanna go with the purity. This is just a flower essence that I'm making for myself, so I'm not gonna go hardcore. Some people think that you shouldn't even touch the flowers, that they should be harvested a certain way. If you touch the petals while you're doing the flower essence, then you're kind of imbuing it with your energy, and that's not usually what people want. So you want to harvest it in a very sustainable way using, you know, like tweezers, or sometimes you can use the leaf of a plant to actually pick off the flower part so that your fingers aren't touching it. But because I'm making this flower essence for myself, I don't really care if my energy gets into it. It's gonna mix with my energy eventually anyways. Some people say that you cannot use store-bought flowers either, and that you really need to go out in nature and connect with the plant spirit. I think that's ideal if you can. However, there are no flowers anywhere in bloom near me, so I did pick these up from the store. A lot of purists are gonna be really mad at me, but I honestly don't care. They're still beautiful. I can still do my flower essence. And so for those that don't know, a flower essence is basically flowers in water. So I have a bowl here that I'm gonna fill with water. You take the petals off, you put them in the water, and then you set it out under the sunlight for about like 3 to 4 hours. There's a bunch of different ways that you can make flower essences, but I'm just gonna go super easy with mine. In my coven this week, we're all making flower essences. So I decided I really wanted a white flower essence. So there's gonna be a lot of white roses, but I also have some other white flowers that I'm throwing into this as well. And really, I just wanted to work with the delicate energies of a white rose or a white flower in general for purity and then also enlightenment, because I am going to take this flower essence. So what you do afterwards, after it sits for like 3 to 4 hours in the sun, you take the petals out, and now that water that you have has been imbued with the essence of this flower. And flower magic is so delicate and so beautiful, and so I really wanted to play off of that delicate nature and create a spray. So I'll be pouring the water into a little spray bottle afterwards, and I'm going to use it as a meditation spray to help me get into altered states of consciousness when I'm sitting down to do my daily meditation. So the white flower for purity, for enlightenment, I thought it would be perfect to create a spray for myself to just spritz in the air right before I meditate. That's what I'm gonna be doing. I don't really know how I'm gonna show you what I'm doing while also showing my face while I'm talking. I think this is the best I'm gonna get it. You can kind of see what I'm doing. You can kind of also see my face. I don't have a top-down tripod, so you know, it is what it is. We're on a budget here, okay? Hopefully this angle is good enough. I have my phone propped up here because there's a couple different categories that I wanted to talk about. So this video, I'll have it broken up into timestamps because we're gonna talk about a lot of different things. So let's talk about just preparing to go to a developing country in general, because prior to my Central American trip, I had only ever traveled to first world countries, and that was just what I was used to. And so I was ready, after all the travels I've done, I was ready to go to a country that is considered a developing country, because I knew that it would give me a perspective shift that I think that everyone deserves to have. So we did have to get a lot of shots before we traveled, which was a little bit crazy. It's not mandatory. The United States didn't actually force us to get shots before traveling to Guatemala or Belize, but it is highly, highly recommended. So if you're traveling to Central America, I do recommend that you have hepatitis A, the full series of shots, hepatitis B, the full series of shots. We also got the polio booster only because neither my partner and I had it yet, and it's for a lifetime, so we might as well get that out of the way. So I had already had hepatitis B, but I did not have my Hep A shot, so I had to get all my Hep A shots. I had to get the polio booster, and I had to get the tetanus shot, and the tetanus shot is paired with two others. It's like diphtheria and pertussis, I think, but you definitely want all the hepatitis shots that you can get, and then also tetanus. That's gonna be something that's really important, and the diphtheria and the pertussis, which is just rolled into the tetanus shot, but you want all three of those. This bowl is kind of small. I'm wondering if I should have done a different bowl. You know what? I'll just extra layer on the petals. I don't think there's gonna be anything wrong with that. And then on top of all those shots, and we also got them all on one day, by the way, and I was so sick because we are going into North Guatemala. So Belize in general is a malaria-free country, and Guatemala for the most part is malaria-free. However, the northern tip as of right now, like the Lake Petén area, which is where we were, there were cases for malaria. So we had to take anti-malarial medication before we went as well. So we had to take it at least a couple days before leaving, during our entire trip, and then a couple days afterwards. And anti-malarial medication is no joke. First of all, it gives you night terrors. That was awful. And second of all, it made me so nauseous. I was not feeling well. So the moment that I could stop taking that anti-malarial medication, I stopped it immediately because my body did not like that. Editing Ivy here, I totally forgot to mention typhoid fever. Typhoid fever is another one that's recommended if you're traveling to Central America. In the United States, you know, we have no exposure to typhoid fever, so we did have to get that as well. There's a vaccine version, like a shot version, and then there's also the oral capsules that you take over a week span. And we decided to do the oral capsules because they last a little bit longer in your body, but they sucked. Taking the typhoid fever pills, we had to do that a whole week before, or 2 weeks before our trip, but it was a week long of just like low grade fever, feeling like crap. So the typhoid fever pills suck. Let me just tell you that. And then we also got antibiotics for a stomach parasite because you cannot drink the water there. As someone from the United States, our bodies are not adjusted to their water. So you cannot drink tap water. You can't even have ice cubes, etc. Some people risk it who have stronger stomachs and they say that they're okay. But for me personally, I have very, very sensitive stomach. So I was not going to drink the water because I knew my stomach would act up. So we ended up getting antibiotics to bring with us. So I highly recommend going to the doctor beforehand, and you can get these ahead of time, these antibiotics, and you only take them if you actually get a stomach bug, if you end up getting a parasite in there that's really upsetting things. So it was just nice to have that on us. So yeah, even just getting your shots to go to a developing country from the United States and getting all this like anti-malarial, the antibiotics, all of that stuff, it was a lot. It was a lot on my body for sure. Okay, you know what? I actually have a lot of petals in here, and I'm going way too slow. So I have this full of white petals now. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a moment to infuse this with my energy, again, because I don't care if my energy gets in it or not. I'm using it on myself anyways. So I'm gonna infuse this with meditative energy off camera, and then we will go place it in the sun, and then we'll come back and we'll do incense. This part is just really, really quick and easy. You're just putting the petals in a bowl and then allowing it to infuse the water. So I will be back. Such a nice, beautiful, sunny day out here. Let's see, where do I want to put this? How about on the edge of my garden bed? I think that'll be perfect. All right, I'm just gonna let this infuse in the sun for about 3 to 4 hours. Okay, so to make incense cones, you really just need some loose incense that you've created. You need some Makko powder. I will link this Makko powder down below in the description box. It's really good quality, it just burns really nice. And really Makko powder, it helps to bind this loose incense together and also make it burn really nice as a cone. It has water-soluble adhesive properties and it is almost odorless, which is perfect because some of these powders do have a smell to them. And I don't like that because then you can't smell the delicious blend that you made and all you can smell is the powder that you ended up mixing it with. So I like this because it's basically odorless, it burns clean. And then you're gonna need a little tray to put your cones on, of course, a mixing bowl, and then a little bit of water. And the measurements are usually, oh yeah, and you'll probably need a tablespoon if you want to be hardcore about it, but sometimes you can just eyeball it. It's totally fine. Most people do, some people do half and half where they do half loose incense, half Makko powder. I am going to do 3 parts incense powder, 1 part Makko powder. So 3 tablespoons of my incense, 1 tablespoon of Makko powder. And then you just kind of drizzle in the water into your powder until it gets to the right consistency where it's moldable and stuff. I have 4 different magical blends that I made. So this is money. So I made one for money. This one's called mastermind. So I use this in all of my workings that revolve around the mind, intellect, things like that. And then I have a blend called Magick. So I have money, mastermind, and Magick. These are my 3 main blends. Magick smells so good and I use it when I'm getting into altered states of consciousness or when I'm just doing anything magical whatsoever. Oh, I do also have a sacral blend here, a sacral incense that I made, but I think we're gonna start with Magick. This one by far is my favorite smell. It smells so good. So this has rose petals, yerba santa leaves, sweet wood, wild cherry bark, licorice root, amber resin, frankincense resin, and then a few drops of some prophecy oil that I had. So I can use this for divination and, you know, magical things like that. But you can so smell the amber resin in this. It's just, oh, it smells so delicious. So let me take a moment to kind of mix this all together and then we will start molding incense cones. Okay, so when it came to packing for our trip, whoops, I said I was gonna use the tablespoons, didn't I? There were a couple things that we brought that I am so glad that we brought. Why is this stuck to the bottom? But I'm so glad I brought like sanitizing wipes for surfaces. I brought 3 different kinds of sanitizing wipes. Oh, it smells so good. I ended up bringing sanitizing wipes for surfaces, for your body, and for your face. And I am so glad I did because when we were out in the jungles and like, you know, using different like bathrooms in different places, it was just nice to have those on hand. You absolutely, oh my gosh, absolutely. If you're gonna be traveling through Central America, you need bug spray. You need it because we got eaten alive. We did bring bug spray and on the days that we did use bug spray, it was totally fine and not a big deal. And it's not even just in the jungles, even on the beach, there were so many mosquitoes and like sand fleas and stuff. And there were some days where I did not use my bug spray and my legs were totally eaten up. By the end of the trip, it looks like my legs right now look like I have some sort of disease because of how many bug bites I ended up getting. So definitely bring your bug spray. And then we also brought snacks. I've never brought food. I've never packed food before because I usually just get food from wherever it is that I'm going, but there is a limited food supply compared to the United States. I'll talk about the grocery stores in a little bit, but it's not as easy to get protein is what we noticed. And my partner and I, we both lift a lot of weights. We eat a lot of protein in our diet. Like protein is something that's just like, you know, an integral part of our diet. And so I ended up packing a bunch of like beef sticks and power bars that were really high protein because, and I'm so glad I did. There were days where we were like surviving off those because it was not quick and easy to get protein anywhere. Like we couldn't find any protein bars in the grocery stores. It's pretty odorless. I mean, you can smell the bark a little bit, but like when it burns, you won't be able to smell it. And the first day traveling, we literally traveled all day trying to get there without a meal. And it was just really, really nice having that food with us so we did not starve. But again, food supply is very limited. So I want to talk about food later in this video too, because there is just not as much variety in the food as there is in the United States. And it's expensive, you know, to import food from other countries and stuff. So it's usually just like fish, chicken, the fruits grown on the land like mangoes and papaya, and then some sort of rice and beans. That's pretty much it. Okay, I think this is fairly mixed now. So I'm just gonna pour a tiny bit of water into this and mix it up. I probably should use something else other than my finger, but whatever. And then I'm just gonna keep kind of pouring in water slowly until it gets to a moldable consistency. Okay, I think I got it to a consistency that's pretty moldable, but before I start making these cones, I'm gonna have a timestamp here just for some basic travel tips. So if you're not interested, feel free to skip this timestamp. But I did have some people ask me, so I wrote down some just really basic travel tips that I wanted to just blow through really quick. So I will say there is so much fear mongering. Like, our government in the United States makes it seem like it's a terrible place, do not travel there. I mean, there were travel advisories saying, don't go to Guatemala, don't do this, don't do that. Yes, there are dangerous parts of Central America, and it just depends on where you're going. Of course, obviously. We could say that about many different countries in the world. But don't be dumb, you know? Be smart and then follow the tips that I've got here and you will be totally fine. The people, every single person that we talked to on our trip was absolutely lovely. They were so nice. We had no problems whatsoever. Obviously, don't go to areas where there's a lot of drugs and a lot of horrible crimes happening. The areas that we went to, it was basically just petty theft crimes of somebody just like stealing your money, you know, unfortunate things like that. So what I was gonna say is, of course, get a lock for things. Like, lock your stuff up if you really want to. You can get the RFID blockers as well. So I have a little pouch that carries my passports, my money and cards, etc., and it's all in this RFID blocking mesh type thing. Obviously, don't stay in sketchy places. Do your research beforehand. I found that if you're going to Guatemala and Belize in particular, because that's mainly where we traveled, of course, you don't really stay in the city. Like, a lot of tourists, you don't stay in Guatemala City. You end up going to Antigua or Lake Atitlan or something like that, which I'm pretty sure I mispronounced that in the lake name, so bear with me. And then for Belize, when you fly into Belize City, you don't stay in Belize City. You go to San Pedro or you go to Placencia. So the major cities is where a lot of that like petty theft is happening. Honestly, I could say that about any major city. I can say that about Seattle, Los Angeles, New York, Paris, all of these big cities. Of course there's going to be theft, especially if you look like a tourist that doesn't belong there. So I really don't think it's as scary as everyone makes it out to be. You just have to be smart when you're traveling. Another thing I was gonna say is look confident. Do not look like you're a tourist at all. If you don't know where you're going, that's fine, but definitely look confident and look like you know where you're going. And that's not a rule for Central America. That's just a rule in general when you travel anywhere. I have traveled solo to different parts of the world and I put my confidence face on. I put a glamour on. I look like I know my shit and I know where I'm going and nobody messes with me. Another thing I wanted to say is be kind and you'll usually receive kindness in return. I think that's so important when you're going to other countries to, especially if they're not English speaking. Please don't assume that everybody speaks English. Try to speak the native language if you can. It will go so far. For example, Belize is the only English speaking, not English speaking, but English is the primary language in Belize with Spanish as secondary, but that's not the case in the rest of Central America. The rest of Central America, Spanish is the primary language. And especially in Guatemala, in certain areas, there are people that don't speak English at all and it's just Spanish. So you're definitely gonna wanna know at least how to have a conversation with somebody or use Google Translate or something like that, but be kind, be considerate. I think that just goes so far and you'll have such a better experience. Another tip I have for you is to hide money in multiple locations. So don't just put all of your money in your wallet, put a little bit of money in your shoe, put a little bit of money in your hat, you know, whatever it is, hide it on an inside pocket of somewhere. It's nice to have your money spread in multiple spots, just in the off chance you do get mugged, your money is stolen or whatever, at least you have a $100 bill in your shoe. And that's not for Central America. Again, that's just travel tip, period. Of course, send your itinerary to loved ones before you go. You wanna make sure that your loved ones know where you're gonna be. In Central America, as I mentioned beforehand, don't drink the water. And there's even some foods that you might want to avoid if you have a sensitive stomach as well. Lettuce, for example, is something that you might want to consider avoiding. Unless the produce was washed with filtered water and you know it was washed with filtered water, then of course go ahead and eat it. But we weren't able to really eat that much street food, which there's so much street food. Unfortunately, that was something that we just could not do because of my stomach. My stomach is so sensitive. And I did actually get sick once on the trip. I got sick. I got the stomach bug for one day out of the trip. We were super, super careful though, and it was just me being careless that day. And I was like, oh, you know what? We've already been here for 12 days, so I'll just try this food and not listen to the alarms going off in my head, and I'll just do it. And then guess what? I got a stomach bug. So just know, if you're coming from the US or from Europe, to maybe not drink the water, always ask for bottled water and make sure the bottled water is sealed as well. Make sure when you open it, it actually cracks that seal. Next tip I have is to talk to locals. Ask them what their favorite restaurants are. That's what we do a lot of the times. We get there and then we ask, what's your favorite restaurant, or what do you like to do? What are your hobbies? You know, try to get to know the locals, the people around you, and try to travel outside of the super touristy places if you feel comfortable doing so. You'll get such better recommendations. And also, I just learned so much from just talking to locals in general. Speaking of which, if you do just want to go to the super touristy places, maybe you're traveling by yourself and you're a little bit nervous, if you go to Guatemala, a lot of people go to Antigua and Lake Atitlan. I will put those up on the screen because I know that I probably pronounced that lake wrong. And then if you go to Belize, most people go to San Pedro, and then secondarily, most people go to Placencia. So if you go to any of these places in Guatemala or Belize, there's so many different resorts that are beautiful, that will take really good care of you, and you don't really have to worry about much. And a lot of these resorts will actually arrange tours for you. So for example, we stayed at Umaya Resorts and Adventures in Placencia, and that resort, there's so many different activities that you can do. So they can arrange a Monkey River tour for you. They can arrange cave tubing, going out snorkeling, etc. So you don't actually have to do the homework yourself. The resort usually takes care of all that for you. So if you want to stay in those super touristy places, that is what I would recommend for Guatemala and then for Belize. So those are my travel tips. Okay, so I'm gonna have timestamps for the rest of this. I want to talk about, what's my next note here? So cars, driving, roads, and police force. Let's talk about that because so many people, let's see, how big do I want this cone to be? It has to fit, my cone has to fit into a little container like this, so it can't be too tall. So let's try this. So a lot of people recommend to not get a car rental, especially in Belize, because gas is so expensive and it can be kind of pricey to rent a car. However, we were there for 15 days and we wanted to drive all over. So we rented a car, and apparently there's only one rental car company that allows you to cross the border, which is so weird to me. Let's see. That looks horrible. Looks horrible. I'm not going for aesthetics here. I'm going for functionality. You know what? It's cute. It's a cute little blob. We're gonna go for it. Okay, so I'm just gonna set it on my tray here, and then you just basically let them dry, and then that's it. That's all you gotta do. Another reason why they say don't rent a car in Guatemala and Belize, and this is kind of the same in most Central American countries. For one, there's checkpoints everywhere. For two, the roads. There's a lot of dirt roads, a lot of potholes. There's actually, like in Belize in particular, the police force is so small. There isn't a lot of police officers, and because of that, they don't have anybody regulating the roads. Like, the reason why they put speed bumps everywhere, and I mean everywhere, you would be going on a road at like 60 miles per hour, and then a speed bump would jump out at you, and you'd have to slam on your brakes and slow down. So you kind of have to know where the speed bumps are. But the police force is so small that speed limits are really just kind of a suggestion, and nobody actually goes the regular speed limit because nobody's getting speeding tickets, right? So they put these speed bumps on the road to kind of like slow people down and not drive so fast. So that's why it's kind of a pain driving around, but I'm so glad we rented a car. If you don't mind driving around on like dirt roads with potholes, and if you don't mind dealing with the speed bumps, I'm glad it gave us the freedom. There is transportation, of course, surprisingly. For it being developing countries, they had really good transportation. You would just hop on a bus and it would be real cheap, and the bus would take you all the way across the country. Driving across Guatemala though, I mean, it would take you a full day to drive from one end, like the southwest end, to the northeast. It would take you all day. It is a huge country. I think people think Guatemala is a lot smaller than it actually is, but it's a very big country. So like if you're going to the north end of Guatemala, like we did, it's actually better to fly into Belize and then get a car that can cross the border and drive from there than it is to fly into Guatemala City. It's just way faster. That's how big Guatemala is. But yeah, the police force is so strange because the police literally don't care, at least in Belize. I'm sure it's different in other Central American countries, but in Belize, because the force is so small, they do not care what you do. We passed these police checkpoints, and so we got our papers out and everything, because like you have to, you know, show your papers sometimes at these police checkpoints. And we drove by, and the police officers, they literally looked at us and they were like, they just kind of waved us on. They did not care at all. We did not get stopped for papers once, which was so, I mean, we don't have checkpoints in the United States. That's not a thing. So checkpoints on the road. That was really weird. Okay, so let's talk about health, grocery stores, and the school system. Oh, and religion. Let's lump that all under this next timestamp. Oh my gosh, my dog is groaning in the background. So the United States actually went down to Belize and built this big, beautiful hospital for them. But when we were talking to some Belizeans, they were saying that the hospital is so fancy that they don't know how to use it, which I thought was completely wild. Yeah, they have a nice fancy hospital, but they don't really have the training. So that was really wild to me. And compared to the United States, there are not a lot of healthcare centers. I mean, here we have a healthcare center in every single city, not even big cities. So it was wild that you may potentially have to drive across the country to get healthcare for a particular issue, whatever that happens to be. When I got sick, because I did get sick there, and I have an autoimmune illness, so I get sick pretty much every time I travel, no matter how careful I am. It's just the way my body is. So I ended up getting sick, and I'm not sure if it was like a sinus infection or cold, or could have just been an autoimmune flare, I don't know. But I did have a low-grade fever, and so I wanted to get some cold medicine to kind of help me with some of the symptoms. And we went to, they have these little pharmacies in Belize, and where we were staying, they did not have any cold medicine at all. Not even a little bit. What they did have antihistamines though, which are for allergies. And so I took some of that to help with like the congestion. It didn't really do much though, because that wasn't really my main issue. And anyways, I did get cough drops though, but it was just wild to me that no cold medicine at all was available. No vitamin C packets. You know, in the United States, we have like a million different brands of vitamin C packets, zinc, elderberry, anything that you could possibly need when you get sick, and that supplies just simply wasn't there. And the grocery stores across Belize and the areas that we went in Guatemala, compared to the United States, they're so different. Because in the United States, we have giant grocery stores. Huge, and some of them are even department stores where you can buy clothing and your groceries together, which is, you know, like we have these huge stores. And even when I travel into Europe, the grocery stores are usually a little bit smaller than the ones that we have here in the United States. But in Central America, the grocery stores were even smaller than that, and it really only consisted of canned food of some sort and then very little produce. I'm talking the grocery stores that we went into, there was rotting fruit and that was it. So most people end up buying their produce on the side of the road from people who like grew it in their backyard, you know? Like you'll see fruit and vegetable stands all over the place. Ugh, my dog hair is, how does my dog hair get everywhere? It's getting into my cones and I don't want to burn dog hair. Okay, there we go. I think we're good. But yeah, it was really interesting. What was a huge culture shock for me when it came to like buying food and groceries and things like that is that you have a person over here that does clothes. You have a person over here that grows vegetables. You have a person over here for this and that, etc. You don't just have one giant department store that you walk in and buy everything all at once. Even the grocery stores, quote unquote, it's mainly just canned food and, like I said, a tiny bit of produce. But really you're buying your produce from the stands on the side of the road. You're buying your clothes from the woman who makes clothes down the street, you know? So everybody has their role in this collective society, which I thought was really cool. But with that, even though I think it's really cool that you have a person for everything, there is a limited supply, and there were some foods from the United States down there, but it was really expensive to like import that food. I mean, we saw a bag of chips. It was like Lay's or Doritos or I don't know. It was something that is made here in the US down there, and it was like double the price for a bag of chips down there. And I was like, holy crap, that is crazy. So I'm very glad that we brought our power bars and beef sticks, because there was nothing like that in the stores that we went to. And I don't know how we would have gone through those long excursions. Like the day we did in Tikal, we did an excursion for 10 hours. And when you're eating only breakfast and then you eat lunch 6 hours later, and then, you know, I need a little snack. I need a little protein bar or something. 6 hours of like running around in the jungle. That's a really long time for me. Also, you kind of just have to be okay with eating anything, you know, like because food supply is so limited in some areas. Like when we were going on day excursions, some of our guides, our tour guides were like, do you eat meat? And we were like, yep. And they were like, great. And that was the only choice that we made. And then they brought us food, which ended up usually being some sort of chicken. Jerk chicken was so good down there. Some sort of chicken and some sort of rice and beans and maybe a little bit of plantain. There's a lot of plantain, you know, roasted plantain on the food as well. So yeah, you can't really be picky, I would say. In the United States, everyone here is so used to, and that's just like when you travel anyways, when you travel anywhere, especially out of the United States, because Americans, we are able to be so picky with our food because we have such abundance around us and we're able to customize every little thing. So if you don't like something, if you're sitting at a restaurant, you say, okay, I want this, but I want this, this, and this taken off. Can you substitute this? Can you do whatever? And you have these long orders. It's like kind of rude to do that in other countries. You don't customize, you eat what you are given. I mean, it just depends on the culture, of course. But coffee is actually another good example of this. This is just me talking about traveling in general. I used to be a barista, and so when I worked at Starbucks, yes, I was a Starbucks barista. It was my very first job and I loved it. I worked there for many years. It was just so fun. But anyways, people would order these very, very complicated drink orders. I mean, those of us in the United States, we know how complicated a coffee order can be. It's not just a latte, okay? It's a latte with 1,000 different things added to it. And that's just how it is here. But when I went to Europe for the first time and I went into coffee shops, I thought it was so interesting because to me, the menu was so limited, especially with the amount of flavors that they had. Like, coffee is coffee there. Coffee is espresso there, okay? You sit down and you have an espresso. You don't have all these 50,000 different flavors to choose from. And it's so funny, the difference with coffee culture, just in general, because in the US, I feel like people drink for flavor rather than to actually enjoy the coffee. This is just my own snobby little perspective as a barista though. And when I went to Europe and people were drinking actual espresso and unflavored lattes and cappuccinos, I was like, yeah, you're actually drinking the real coffee. But again, that's just me being a snob, so ignore that. But yeah, you can't be super picky when you're traveling elsewhere. And so we just kind of ate whatever. We told them we eat meat, or if you're a vegetarian, you say I'm vegetarian, and then they provide some food for you and you eat what is put in front of you, and that's that. Okay, so something I saw about the school system that was really quite a culture shock for me is that every kid wears uniforms and they're all color coded differently. So like, you know, for example, elementary school kids will have a certain color for their uniform, and then middle school kids will have a different color for their uniforms. High school, you'll have a different color, etc. And first of all, in most states in the United States, we do not have uniforms unless you go to like a private school, unless your parents pay a lot of money to put you through this special private school, then you might have a uniform. But otherwise in public school, we usually don't have uniforms. That's not really a thing. So I thought it was really strange to see school uniforms, like kids getting out of school and then them walking in their color-coded uniforms depending on their age. It was really cute actually, but we were like, why the uniforms, you know? And of course, the most basic obvious answer that we got was that it reduces discrimination. Also, Belize in particular is mainly Christian, specifically Catholic. So there was a lot of Christian influences everywhere. I have just like this tiny little bit left and it's not enough to make a cone on its own. So maybe I can just add this in. I'll show you how many cones this made though, because I think I got quite a bit out of it. Look at that. Look how many cones I made out of that. And they smell so amazing. So I might do another blend. So this is just the Magic blend. Maybe I should do money next. I'm not really sure, but I'm so happy with how many that is. Okay, so I think I'm gonna do my money powder next. So for anybody that's interested, this is my recipe. Basil, Egyptian chamomile, blessed thistle, bay leaves, patchouli, and then I put in a couple drops of a money oil that I already had. It can be literally any money oil. And I've got a bunch of different containers of this, so I'm ready to combine literally all of them. So let me mix this up really quick and then I will be right back. Just kidding, I'm actually gonna talk while I mix this up. This incense blend does not smell as good as the Magic one. It really doesn't. But I don't use this incense blend because it smells good. I use it because it's effective. So if I'm doing any sort of money meditation, money incantation, a spell for money, whatever it is, I am always using this money powder. You can burn it and then pass your spell items through the smoke. You can just burn it while you meditate, etc. But yeah, this is my favorite money powder. And actually, I'm not gonna turn all of it into incense cones because with this money powder, I also like to, oh my gosh, this is not coming out of the little tiny jar. I also like to dress my candles with this money powder as well. So I'm gonna keep some of it in powder form. I think I need some, this is not coming out. I don't know what the heck this is, but I just found it in my kitchen. So we're gonna use this to get it out because why not? It works. And oh wow, that works insanely well. I don't even know what this thing is. Okay, so now I want to talk about other Central American countries. So the other, I had actually asked my tour guides this question, and I said, if you had to give me the vibes, if you had to give me vibes between all the different Central American countries, how would you describe it? Like similarities, differences? And the answer I got is somewhat along the lines of this. So basically, Belizeans consider themselves part of the Caribbean. So Belize, again, is the only English, not English speaking, but English is the primary language, whereas the rest of Central America, it's all Spanish. And Belize, they really consider themselves a part of the Caribbean, and they have definitely a more Caribbean vibe to it than the rest of Central America. So Belize and Guatemala is quite different. And that's even reflected in the food and how they cook and the spices that they use, you know, the flavors and such. Belize also has such a small population compared to the rest of the countries in Central America. It is even, I mean, first of all, it's a really small country. And then second of all, there's just so much land that is not occupied. It's, I mean, we would drive all across the country and there would be no one. There would be maybe one random house here and there. And even the cities themselves, the cities were pretty small too compared to a lot of the cities here in the United States. And there's just not a lot of people. It's not a big population at all. I feel like going to Belize, it was just a lot of nature, a lot of jungle and rainforest, etc. Whereas Guatemala has a huge population. First of all, they're a huge country. And second of all, it is very, very populated in some areas. We were told not to go to Honduras because Honduras is a little bit dangerous right now. We also heard that El Salvador is getting better because they have a new president, and apparently the president is really kind of cool. So it is up and coming there. It's a lot better than it used to be. And then Panama, of course, and Costa Rica, both are just gorgeous. Panama City is so not developing country. It is like a first world city. Panama is very, very different than the rest of Central America. But even just driving through different countries and seeing the living conditions of some people, it was mind-blowing to me. Mind-blowing to see the living conditions of some people in certain parts of the world. It really made me so grateful for what I have. And honestly, here's something that I really want to talk about. Though the living conditions for some people in those areas can be really poor and there is a limited food supply, healthcare is not the greatest, etc., the people there are so nice. They're so nice. They're willing to help you out. It's very much a community environment, whereas in the United States, it's very much about the individual. We're so individualistic here and rude. Honestly, I don't want to say all Americans are rude. That's absolutely not true. But where I live, in Seattle in particular, it's actually nicknamed the Seattle Freeze. It's kind of funny because everyone is very aloof and standoffish here. It's very difficult to make friends. Not a lot of people will talk to you. Like when you're out in public, people don't come up to each other. That's an absolute no. We usually stay away from each other. It's just not the friendliest vibes. And I know I'm gonna upset a lot of people by saying that. There's gonna be people in the comments that are like, I live in Seattle and I think it's very friendly. Well, that's fine. But that has not been my experience. So, and of course, you know, there's different states, like especially if you go to the South in the United States, there's a lot of really friendly people. But there are some areas like Seattle where people are very introverted, very standoffish, and it is harder to make friends. But when we are traveling, people are so A, grateful for what they have, and B, just lovely. So, so nice and welcoming. And I was just blown away by the hospitality. Like there was this guy, so Mr. Corvus had gone off to climb on top of a temple, right? And I stayed back by myself and I was sitting at like a park bench or something. And this guy comes up to me and I thought he was hitting on me. And maybe he was, I don't really care. But he sat down and started telling me his entire life story and he was just wanting to have a little chat. I spoke a little bit of Spanish Spanish with him because I took 3 years of Spanish, but my Spanish is really, really bad because I had no one to speak it to. So anyways, I tried speaking Spanish with him a little bit, and then he switched to English because I told him my Spanish was so bad. But he came up to me, this was in Guatemala, and he started speaking Spanish to me, and I was speaking back, and then I was like, oh, do you speak English? Because I said the basics, you know? But anyways, I was really proud of myself, by the way, because I said more than good and what is your name? Okay, I had a mini conversation in Spanish and I was very proud of myself. Anyway, so this guy comes up and he's just like telling me about his baby mama and his kids and stuff, and he was really friendly, but I was like, why are you telling me this? And it wasn't weird vibes or anything. It wasn't like he was trying to gauge who I was to kidnap me or to what. That's just how people are. They're just friendly and they just want to have conversations with you. Like I was talking to one of our tour guides and she was mentioning, oh yeah, that's totally normal. People just come up to you and say hi and they want to have a little chat. And let me tell you, that is not normal where I live. We do not just come up and have a little chat with each other. In fact, in my area, it's actually seen as really rude because people are so busy and you're trying to get from one place to another place. If you just stop someone and try to have a little chat with them, it's seen as really rude in some instances. I mean, I don't want to say that that's a hard rule though, because there are some instances where we do chat with each other, but for the most part, it's not like it is in Central America. But yeah, the living conditions as we were driving across the country were just insane to see. It was so crazy to me. Like having a washer and dryer in your house is a luxury. Most people do not have that. Most people don't even own a car and they either hitchhike or they take the bus. So yeah, just things like that were drastically different. We're so spoiled in the United States and we don't even realize it. And the amount of consumption in the United States is kind of gross to me because we are so wasteful here. I'm gonna really piss off so many people with this video. We are though. The amount of waste that we produce as a first world country is insane. People don't compost and recycle and whatever, and we just take everything for granted. And after being in Central America, seeing how grateful people are for what they have, and then coming home to the United States to watch people overconsume and just produce trash everywhere, it's hard to see. It really is honestly hard to see. So yes, I missed home for all of our fancy luxuries, but the people, I'm gonna miss the people so much, to the point where I would actually consider giving up all of my luxuries to move down to Central America. That's how much I loved it there. Anyways, I'm gonna wrap up these incense cones and the flower essence in a couple hours, and I will show you the results from all of that. Okay, it's been about 3 hours later. I finished up the incense cones and then I also finished up the flower essence as well. So I wanted to show you that real quick. Here is what we're working with. So first 2 rows are my Magick blend. Last 2 rows is the Money incense blend. And then I just got a little spray bottle. I took the petals out of the bowl and then put it into a measuring cup so it would pour a little bit easier because I had a spout on it. And then I poured that into a little spray bottle. So now I can just spritz this right before my meditations to invoke purity and enlightenment. So I'm excited to use this. Thanks for coming along with me today as I do some random stuff and talk about some random things. I appreciate it. I've got some really exciting video topics coming up for the rest of this month. I also have some really fun collaborations planned and I'm just excited for what comes next. See you all soon.